Hello, and welcome to Eli's Amazing World of Podcast. Today we will be covering Cherokee Myths from our textbook. So, the first thing to cover, the Cherokee Myths, they're very detailed, and they are passed down kind of through word of mouth, through storytelling. But they kind of are similar to some of the other myths and stories that we have read through this semester. The most important, the first story, is related to creation of the world, which, as we have seen in the Quran and the Bible, there are creation stories in there as well. And the creation story from the Cherokees is different in the ways that it describes how the people, or how they sent a water beetle down to examine the earth. Now the earth was strung up by strings, and how it would fall into the water and be destroyed whenever it was time when it got old. But how they sent down a water beetle to explore the earth and see if it was inhabitable, because they were waiting above the earth, and apparently the water beetle found mud, and the mud turned into land as over time and dried up, and the animals slowly started making their way down eventually to the people. And at the very end of the story, we see 7 days before the first human was born, which from both the Quran and the Bible, from the Bible specifically, everything was created in 7 days, according to the words that are in the scripture there. In the Quran, everything was created, but the time frame was different. So, but it still had a similar creation style story to it that is very, it's oddly similar, but has its own distinct differences between the Cherokee story and the Bible and the Quran. The next story that is seen in the Bible and the Cherokee Myths, is the flood. The flood occurred in Genesis, and that's at the very beginning of the Bible. But in the number 14 in our Cherokee Myths was called the Great Deluge. The Great Deluge was a flood that apparently there was an Indian that came down to talk to his dog that was barking at the river, and the dog spoke back to the Indian, telling him that he needed to build a raft and to save his family because the river was going to rise and cover the mountain peaks and cover the valleys. And so the Indian didn't believe the dog, and then the dog showed him. The dog's spine was showing, and so then the Indian believed him. And the Indian built the raft, put his family on it, put provisions on it, and they survived through the flood. And the flood apparently covered, from the story of the Cherokee Myths, covered the mountaintops. And as we see in the Bible, the flood covered the mountaintops and covered the entire area and covered the world from the Bibles. But it covered the entire area in the Cherokee Myth. But it still covered the mountaintops, and still similar because God told a man named Noah in the Bible to build a raft to save his family because it was going to flood. And you have a dog telling an Indian to build a raft because it was going to rain, and the river was going to rise. So it's similar, but not exactly the same yet, but still similar. And in number 13 of the Cherokee Myths, about the strawberries, which is a kind of an interesting story to introduce strawberry. But there was apparently a man and a woman who were arguing, and the woman had left the man, and the man was left there trying to figure out what had happened. And apparently the Indian's god had told him to go pursue her, and as she walked away, he caused different fruits and different fruits and flowers to grow alongside the path she was walking. We have a very sorry special guest. But as she continued to walk along the path, she saw the fruit. She saw mulberries. She saw dewberries, fruits on different trees, and various other things. But the only time she stopped was to look at the strawberries that were placed in front of her. She stopped to pick a few strawberries and to eat some. And as she stopped, she turned back, looking towards the west, where her husband had been walking towards her. And she decided to turn around and lead back to him, forgetting what had happened. And they eventually made up and came back together. But in the Bible, how this story relates to the Bible, is because in the beginning of this Cherokee story, it mentions specifically after the man had been created, and then he had a companion, the woman, and they had gotten into an argument and split. In the Bible, it started with a man named Adam, and then he had a companion that was made from his rib named Eve. Eve and Adam, or Adam and Eve, were in the garden, and after sin happened, they had to leave the garden. But the fact that Adam and Eve, it was specifically mentioned in the Cherokee story that came before. It was specifically mentioned in the Cherokee story that Adam came and then Eve, and then in the and then in this story it was mentioned that a man came and then the woman was his companion. So, but those are the relations to that from the Bible and the Cherokee story. So let's see. I want to say that is all the things I found that kind of related specifically. The story about fire did not specifically relate to any of the previous readings we've read. The story about the crops in the game did not relate to anything else that I found. But those are the 3 main things that I found that related. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.